They say the frontier has a way of swallowing the weak and testing the strong, but every now and then it delivers someone to the land who's meant to change it. That's how the old storytellers begin this tale, with a wind-scraped mesa, a lonely cabin, and a rancher named Elias Cade who didn't know he was waiting for anything at all. The sun had dropped low that evening, spilling red across the desert in long, burning strokes. Elias was doing what he always did, tending to the last of the cattle, moving slow but steady, the rhythm of a man who'd long ago traded noise for silence. His ranch sat quiet beneath the towering ridges, a stubborn patch of green pressed against a world of sun-scorched clay. Folks said the land looked dead, but Elias knew better. He'd coaxed life out of worse. He was heading back toward the cabin when he saw something out of place, a shape lying near the fence line, half covered in dust. At first he thought it was a down calf, but then a small hand moved. Elias froze. A woman. Collapsed, breath faint as a whisper. He reached her in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees. Her skin was hot, her lips cracked, her dress torn by the desert wind. Fever had taken hold hard and fast. She tried to lift her head, but couldn't, her voice barely a scratch in the air. "Water," she breathed. Elias didn't waste a second. He scooped her up, light as dry straw, and carried her into his cabin. He laid her on his cot, fetched cool cloths, and forced her trembling hands around a tin cup. She drank like someone who had forgotten what hope tasted like. Her name, when she could speak it, was Mara Ellison, a widow, traveling alone and on foot after her horse collapsed 2 days earlier. Her story was simple and tragic. Most frontier stories were. But there was something different about her. Something quiet, strong, a grief she carried like a hidden scar. Elias gave her space. He wasn't a man who asked questions. He tended to her fever, cooked her broth, and checked on her through the night. She slept fitfully, murmuring names he didn't know, clutching at air as if trying to hold on to someone who wasn't there. By morning, the fever had broken, though she was still too weak to stand. She stared out the window at the mesa peaks glowing under the dawn and whispered, "I didn't think anyone would find me." Elias shrugged in that slow, almost shy way of his. "Desert don't get the last say. Not if I'm around." Days passed. Mara regained her strength, helping with chores when she could. Elias found himself listening for her footsteps, noticing the way she traced the wooden beams of the cabin as though memorizing safety. She smiled rarely, but when she did, it felt like it belonged to another life, a better one. Yet even in that quiet peace, the world outside was stirring. Elias Cade's land was worth more than gold in this thirsty corner of the West, and the men who coveted it didn't take kindly to being told no. Fences were found cut, cattle spooked, boot tracks where they shouldn't be. Elias said little, but Mara saw something change in him. A tightening, a readiness. As the old storyteller puts it, some folks don't know they've found their place in the world, not until the world itself rises up to take it from him. Old folks say the desert keeps its own kind of secrets, buries some under sand, whispers others through the canyon winds. But every secret has a shadow, and sooner or later, shadows find their way to the surface. That's what began happening on Elias Cade's land the day Mara Ellison found her strength again. By the second week, color had returned to her cheeks. She rose early, helped with the cattle, and mended what needed mending. She worked quietly, moving like someone who had known too much hardship to waste energy on complaint. Elias watched her from the corner of his eye, noting how her hands trembled only when she thought no one was looking. One evening, after a long day branding calves, Mara leaned against a post and said softly, "My husband, he died in a shootout. Wrong place, wrong hour. Sometimes I still hear the bullet, right behind my ear." Elias didn't offer comfort, not with words. He simply nodded, that slow, grounded nod of a man who'd seen suffering up close and knew it wasn't something you stitch shut easily. But he stayed near her the rest of the night. The next morning brought the first sign of trouble. A fence on the north edge had been cut clean through, not torn by cattle, not worn by weather. Cut deliberate, like someone leaving a message. Elias repaired it without a word. Mara noticed his jaw was tighter than usual. 2 days later, they found one of Elias's steers lying dead near the creek, throat slit. Mara gasped when she saw it. Elias crouched beside the animal, running a calloused hand along its hide. "Land baron," he muttered. "Morgan Tate. Wants my spring. Wants my land. Figures fear is cheaper than buying." "But why?" Mara asked. "Why your land?" "Water," Elias said simply. "And men like Tate hate when a man stands his ground." Mara saw something in Elias then, a tension coiled beneath his calm, a readiness in his shoulders, as if danger were an old companion he expected to see again. That night, she woke to strange murmurs. Elias, asleep in his chair, was muttering under his breath, names she had never heard. "Ramirez, Collins, Haley, don't move, incoming." It wasn't the language of ranching. It wasn't the talk of cattle or storms or fence posts. It was the whisper of battle. Mara approached him slowly. His eyes opened instantly. No confusion, no grogginess, the reaction of someone trained to rise alert, even from sleep. "Elias," she whispered. "Who were those names?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "Ghosts. Folks I failed. Folks I couldn't save. You talk like a soldier." He didn't deny it, just stared at the firelight flickering across the floorboards. "A long time ago," he said. "Different country, different war. A man's allowed to start over. Out here, no one asks who you used to be." Mara's breath hitched. A veteran, not just any soldier, but one carved by loss and fire. She wondered how much pain he carried behind that silence, how many memories he patched over with work and solitude. "Elias," she whispered, "I think trouble's coming." He looked at her with eyes that had seen too many battles to pretend otherwise. "It always does." Over the next days, the shadows on the red earth grew darker. Riders appeared on distant ridges, silhouettes against the blazing sky. Notes were left on the barn door. Threats scratched into the dust. And through it all, Elias moved with a steady calm that frightened Mara more than the threats themselves. As though he had expected this. As though the quiet peace they'd shared had always been temporary. As the storyteller often says, danger don't sneak up on the men who've already faced it. It walks toward him, slow and certain, like it recognizes one of its own. The old storytellers say trouble doesn't always roar when it comes. Sometimes it slips in quiet, like a snake in tall grass, waiting for the moment a soul lets their guard down. But on the night the land baron struck, trouble came with fire. It was well past midnight when Mara jolted awake. At first she thought it was part of a dream, the echo of her husband's last moments, the memory that still clawed at her ribs. But then she heard it again. Footsteps on the porch. Low voices. The crackle of flames somewhere too close. Mara sat up in the dark, lungs tight, hands trembling. A strange paralysis crept over her. The same terror that had swallowed her the night she lost everything. Her body wouldn't obey her. She couldn't breathe right. Couldn't think. Couldn't move. The doorknob rattled. "Elias," she choked out, her voice barely a thread. "Elias, I can't move." Instantly, he was beside her. He hadn't been asleep. Men like Elias rarely slept deep. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady, warm, grounding. "You don't need to move," he whispered. "I've got you." Her breath hitched. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes, but Elias brushed none of them away. He simply lifted her into his arms, gentle, careful, as though she were made of something precious, something he feared losing. Outside, men shouted. Wood cracked as someone kicked at the side of the cabin. Firelight spilled through the windows, flickering across Elias's face, revealing not fear, but focus. A shift inside him, sharp as a blade. He carried Mara out the back, keeping low, moving fast through the dark. Every step was precise, calculated. He wasn't guessing his way through danger. He was navigating it like an old map etched into memory. He headed toward the stone ruins, remnants of a long-forgotten homestead, now half-buried in sand. Solid walls, good cover. Behind them, the cabin erupted in flames. Mara gasped. "You're home." "Walls can burn," Elias said. "People can't be replaced." He set her gently behind the shelter of the stones. The shadows wrapped around them as the attackers fanned out across his land. Mara could hear the crunch of boots, the clink of rifles being chambered. Elias leaned in close, voice barely audible. "You're safe here. Stay low. But you, I've lived through worse nights than this." Then Mara saw it. The truth. The way Elias moved, low, efficient, disciplined. The way he scanned the landscape. The way he assembled his rifle with silent, practiced motions. This wasn't the bearing of a simple rancher. This was a soldier stepping back into a war he thought he'd left behind. In the dim glow, she saw scars on his arms she had never noticed. The sharp clarity in his eyes. The controlled breath of someone trained to fight in darkness. Her heart pounded, not with fear, with understanding. Elias wasn't calm because he was fearless. He was calm because he'd faced death before and learned how to walk beside it without flinching. He slipped away from the ruins like a shadow himself. Moments later, gunfire cracked through the night, sharp, deliberate shots. Not wild, not desperate. Elias was picking off threats one by one, using the terrain, the darkness, every tactician's trick he carried from a war people out here had never even heard of. Mara crouched low, trembling, not with fear now, but with fury. They had burned his home. They had hunted him like an animal. And all because he refused to give up the one patch of land that had given him peace. Bootsteps approached the ruins. Too many. Too close. Elias returned, sliding into cover beside her, breathing hard but steady. "They've got numbers," he murmured, "and they ain't giving up." Mara looked into his eyes, storm gray, lit by fire and grit. Something inside her steadied. The fear didn't vanish, but it fell behind something stronger. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now let me stand with you." Elias's throat tightened. He nodded once, slow, proud, aching. The attackers closed in. Their torches burned against the horizon like angry stars. The storyteller always pauses here, leaning close to the fire before saying. That was the moment those two souls stopped running from their pasts and started fighting for their future. The old storytellers say dawn has a way of judging men, showing plainly who they are when the darkness strips away their lies. And on that breaking horizon, with the ruins at their backs and firelight reflecting in their eyes, Mara Ellison and Elias Cade were judged worthy. The attackers crept closer, their torches bobbing like angry fireflies against the frozen silence. Mara's hands shook as she leveled the rifle Elias had placed in them, but her gaze was steady. Beside her, Elias crouched low, muscles coiled, every breath controlled. "They'll rush us at first light," Elias murmured. "Tate's kind always count on fear to finish the job." Mara swallowed hard. "Then we'll give him something else to count on." A small smile twitched at the corner of Elias's mouth. The kind a man wears when he realizes he isn't standing alone. The first shot split the silence. Mara fired. The bullet struck the ground inches from the lead rider's boot, shocking the advancing line. For a moment, all the world held its breath. Elias used that heartbeat, rising from cover with the calm precision of a man returning to old instincts. He moved like someone born to survive battle, efficient, controlled, almost serene. Not reckless. Never that. Every motion was measured, every shot deliberate, every step a story of wars fought far beyond this dusty land. The attackers scrambled behind boulders and deadfall, shouting curses, firing blindly. But Elias was no simple rancher defending his home. Mara saw it all now. The soldier beneath the quiet exterior, the veteran who had walked away from one battlefield only to be forced into another. Men tried to flank them. Elias predicted it before it happened. A rifle cracked. A man dropped. Another tried, scaling the rocks behind them. Elias was already turning, already aiming. The legend of that morning lives long in frontier memory. The rancher who fought like a ghost born from war, and the widow who found her courage in the shadow of loss. But it wasn't all gunfire and grit. When Mara's hands began shaking too badly to reload, Elias covered her, shielding her with his own body. When Elias took a hit to the arm, a grazing shot that tore cloth and skin, Mara steadied him with a fierce whisper. "You're not alone. Not anymore." At sunrise, the last wave came, brutal, desperate, determined. And with it, Morgan Tate himself, smug atop his stallion, believing victory was a foregone conclusion. "Cade," he bellowed, "you can't hold this land. You're one man." Elias stepped forward, rifle lowered but unshaking. "You brought 15 men," he said, voice level. "If you thought that'd be enough, you don't know who you're fighting." Tate laughed, until Mara rose beside Elias, rifle aimed with deadly calm. Her trembling was gone. Her fear burned clean away. "You should leave," she told Tate, "before you become the land you're trying to steal." Something shifted in Tate's eyes then. The bravado cracked. He saw the bodies, saw Elias's stance, saw the truth. This wasn't a battle for land. It was a battle for two souls who had already lost too much. Tate turned his horse sharply and fled, his remaining men scrambling after him. When the dust settled, the world felt suddenly, impossibly quiet. Elias sank to one knee, exhaustion finally dragging him earthward. Mara rushed to him, hands on his shoulders, tears streaking through soot on her cheeks. "You didn't let them take it," she whispered. His voice was rough but warm. "Couldn't. This land, it's my last chance at peace. And you," he looked at her, a softness there no bullet could kill. "You're the reason I fought like hell to keep it." Mara pressed her forehead to his. "Then we'll build something here. Together." The sun broke over the mesa then, gold pouring across the ruins, touching the two of them like a blessing. And the old storyteller always ends it with the same quiet line. Some say he saved her. Others say she saved him. Truth is, the frontier never forgot either of their names.